Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to dig into something interesting.
Well, today we're tackling something that's super relevant if you love to travel, or maybe, you're thinking about taking the plunge and living abroad.
Ooh, yeah, big decision.
Big decision indeed. We're talking life insurance. Specifically, how does all that globetrotting or, living in another country affect your life insurance situation?
It's something a lot of people don't even think about.
Yeah, it kind of gets lost in all the excitement of planning a trip or, picturing yourself sipping cappuccinos in Italy or something.
Right, exactly. But it's definitely something you want to be aware of.
Big time. Luckily, we've got some fantastic insights to share with you all today, straight from the experts over at Diversified Insurance Brokers.
They really know their stuff when it comes to this.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. First things first, we got to understand how insurance companies view all this travel, right? They're all about assessing risk.
Yeah, risk is the name of the game for them.
So how do they actually evaluate frequent travel or living abroad when they're looking at life insurance applications?
Well, they take a lot of factors into account, like how often you travel.
Okay, so frequency is a big one.
Makes sense, right? Like multiple trips a year to, let's say, a place with a lot of political instability going on.
Yeah, that's going to be different than someone just taking their one annual vacation to like, I don't know, the Bahamas or somewhere super chill.
Exactly. The Bahamas versus, a region with ongoing conflicts, those are totally different risk profiles for insurers.
Right, right. So frequency is important. What else are they looking at?
They're also looking at how long you're staying in these places. Obvious, right? A 2-week vacation is different than living abroad for a year.
Of course, duration matters. So it's like frequency, duration, and what else?
The specific countries, of course, like where are you actually going? Some destinations are considered riskier than others. And then even the purpose of your travel plays a role.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. A business trip where you're probably staying in relatively safe areas, that's going to be assessed differently than, let's say, a backpacking trip through the Amazon rainforest, right?
Wow, yeah. Backpacking solo through the Amazon versus like, going to a conference in London for work. Totally different vibes.
Exactly. And insurers are looking at all of that. They're trying to get a complete picture of your travel patterns and the potential risks involved.
So to sum it up so far, it's like if you're just taking the occasional trip to a pretty safe and stable place, you're probably not going to see a huge impact on your life insurance.
Probably not. You might not even have to mention it, depending on your insurer's policies.
But if you're a frequent flyer or you're headed somewhere, a little more off the beaten path, then you definitely want to talk to your insurance broker and be upfront about your travel plans.
Absolutely. It's always better to be transparent and have everything out in the open.
Now, let's say you're not just traveling a lot, but you're actually living abroad. What happens then, especially for, us folks who are U.S. citizens but living in another country long term?
That's a great question. And that's when things can get a little more, how should I put it, nuanced.
Nuanced, I like it. So what are the nuances here?
Well, for U.S. citizens living abroad, some insurers, and I want to emphasize it's not all insurers, but some of them, they really want to see proof that you've got strong ties back to the U.S.
Proof of strong ties back to the U.S. Okay, that sounds a little vague. What does that actually look like in practice?
It varies from insurer to insurer, but some of the most common things they're looking for are, well, do you own property in the U.S.? Do you have a lot of financial assets here, like investments in the stock market or, retirement accounts? Or maybe you have close family members living in the U.S.
So basically, they want to see that you're not completely cutting ties with the U.S.
Yeah, they're looking for those connections, those anchors that suggest you might eventually return to the U.S.
So it's not just about where you are right now. It's also about your potential future plans.
Precisely.
This whole conversation's got me thinking. I never really thought about this before, but could someone who's not a U.S. citizen, could they actually get a life insurance policy from a U.S.-based company?
That's an interesting question. And, it actually is possible in some cases. It's definitely not as common, but it's not totally out of the question.
Okay, so under what circumstances could that happen?
Usually, a foreign national would need to have a few things in place. First, they'd need a U.S. bank account. Then they would need to have an established residency status here in the U.S.
So they'd have to be living here legally, essentially.
Exactly. And then, similar to what we were just talking about with U.S. citizens living abroad, they would need to demonstrate ties to the U.S.
Okay, so it's not an automatic yes, but it's also not an automatic no. It really depends on the individual situation.
Exactly. It's all about those individual circumstances and what makes sense for each person.
All right, so we've talked about how insurers view travel and living abroad. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the actual life insurance policies. What are the main types of policies that someone who travels a lot or lives abroad might want to consider?
Well, there are two main options that usually come up in these situations. The first one is, what we call traditional fully underwritten policies. These are the most common type of life insurance, and they typically offer the most competitive rates.
Okay, traditional policies, those are the ones most people are familiar with.
Right, but here's the thing. With these traditional policies, the underwriting process, the whole process of evaluating your application can be a bit more rigorous, especially if you're traveling internationally a lot or you're living abroad.
Makes sense. They want to make sure they have all the information they need to assess the risk accurately. So traditional policies are one option. What's the other one?
The other option is something called specialized global life insurance. And as you might guess from the name, these policies are designed specifically for people who need coverage that, goes beyond borders.
So no matter where you are in the world, you're covered.
You got it. These global policies, they don't have those geographical restrictions that you might find with some traditional policies.
So if you're someone who's constantly on the move, like a true citizen of the world, these global policies sound like they might be a good fit. But I'm guessing there's got to be some kind of trade-off, right? Nothing's ever completely perfect.
You're right about that. Global life insurance, it gives you more flexibility for sure, but that flexibility often comes with a slightly higher price tag.
Okay, so you might pay a bit more for that peace of mind of knowing you're covered no matter where you roam.
Exactly. So which type of policy is best? Well, it all comes back to individual needs and circumstances. There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
And that's why it's so important to, have someone in your corner who really knows their stuff, like finding a good insurance broker, someone who understands all these nuances of foreign travel and living abroad and how they affect life insurance.
Oh, absolutely. A good broker is like gold in these situations. They can help you navigate all the complexities and make sure you have the right coverage for your specific situation.
And I'm guessing Diversified Insurance Brokers would be a good place to start.
Definitely. They specialize in this area. They've got a ton of experience, and they can really help you sort through all the options and figure out what's best for you.
They can connect you with different carriers, compare different policies, really hold your hand through the whole process. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, don't worry, there are experts out there who can help.
Exactly. There's no need to go it alone.
All right, so if we had to sum up all this amazing info, what would be the big takeaway for our listeners today?
Big takeaway.
I think it's this. If international travel or living abroad is part of your life, or you think it might be in the future, then you got to be informed about how it impacts your life insurance.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about being proactive.
Knowledge is power, right? You've got options, but you got to go what they are to make the best decisions.
Exactly.
And on that note, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap things up?
You know what? I would just say this. When you're thinking about your life insurance needs, take a moment to really consider your travel patterns, both now and, where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years down the road? Are you planning on making a big move abroad? Do you dream of traveling more extensively once you retire?
Yeah, good point. Sometimes we get so caught up in the present that we forget to think about how our lives might change in the future.
Exactly. And those future plans, they can have a big impact on your life insurance decisions. So factor that in. It could save you a lot of hassle later on.
That's such great advice. Think about where life might take you and make sure your life insurance can keep up.
Exactly.
All right, everyone, that's all for today's deep dive. We hope you found this helpful and informative. And as always, if you have any questions or you just want to chat about your specific situation, don't hesitate to reach out.
We're always happy to